12 years ago, I was just a 10-year-old child, full of curiosity about the world, but also with a trace of timidity. At that time, the summer sun was always so bright. The sky was blue as if it had been washed, but the memory of that day has left an indelible shadow in my heart, which is still as clear as yesterday when I think back. That day, I was the only one left at home. The TV was playing my favorite cartoon program, and I was curled up in the corner of the sofa, enjoying the rare tranquility. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock on the door, breaking the silence. I got up, a little apprehensive, as there were usually very few visitors in the house at this time of the day. I closed to the cat's eye, through the small hole to look out, only to see the door stood a middle-aged man dressed in work clothes, carrying a toolbox in his hand. His face looked a little blurry under the slanting afternoon sun, but I was impressed by the eagerness in his eyes. "Kids, does your refrigerator need repair?" "I'm here to fix the refrigerator." His voice sounded professional, but with a hint of imperceptible nervousness. I was too young to think much about it, except that I remembered my mom complaining about the washing machine the other day, saying that it was too expensive to replace it with a new one, and that she was planning to find a master to come and see if she could fix it. Thinking that my mom had contacted a repair person ahead of time, I instinctively replied, "Oh, you might be wrong. We have a problem with the washing machine at home, not the refrigerator. However, my mom is not at home. Can you wait for a while and come back? Or I'll have her call you back." The man outside the door was silent for a moment, and then said, "Okay. Then ask your mom to give her a mention when she comes back, and I'll come back later." With that, he turned and left, his footsteps fading into the hallway. I closed the door and returned to the couch to continue watching my TV program, vaguely uneasy in my mind, but soon immersed myself in the joys of animation and put the matter behind me. It wasn't until late afternoon, when my mom came home from work, that I brought up the afternoon's incident. Mom said with a puzzled look, "The refrigerator is not broken, and I haven't contacted anyone about fixing the washing machine." Upon hearing this, I just thought it might be a misunderstanding and didn't look into it any further. However, the next day, the calm neighborhood was shrouded in an uneasy atmosphere. Neighbors gathered around and talked, panic and worry written all over their faces. It turned out that just the day before, a man posing as a maintenance worker had blended into our neighboring building for Teespin, used the same trick to trick open the door, and went in to commit a robbery, and even more heinous, he had brutally murdered all the members of that family. This news was like a bomb that shook the whole neighborhood and filled my heart with fear. I recalled what the repairman looked like, and although the details were blurred, the inexplicable nervousness was vivid in my mind. I began to be glad that I was so timid at the time, and it was because of that timidity that I did not open the door so easily, unintentionally avoiding a possible disaster. Thinking about it, I couldn't help but shiver. If I hadn't hesitated then, the consequences would have been unimaginable. When my mom learned of this, she hugged me tightly, her eyes full of fear and gratitude. She repeatedly told me that in the future, when a stranger knocks on the door, you must first confirm the identity of the other party, and never open the door easily. During that period of time, security measures were strengthened in the neighborhood. Security doors were installed in every house, and everyone's awareness of safety was raised to an unprecedented level. I still remember that it was a sunny morning. I was 6 years old, and I spent a happy time in kindergarten. The kindergarten teacher was a kind, middle-aged woman who always took us to play all kinds of games and taught us to sing and dance. That morning, I was playing hide-and-seek with my friends, and the sound of laughter filled the whole playground. My mom dropped me off at kindergarten early in the morning and then hurried off to work. She worked for a company not far from her home, and she would take the time to pick me up at noon and bring me home for lunch, and then bring me back in the small yard of the kindergarten. The flowers in the flower beds were in full bloom, and butterflies were dancing among the flowers. My friends were all playing happily while I was imagining what it would be like when my mom came to pick me up at noon. Time flew by and it was lunchtime. I lined up with the other children to wash our hands and get ready for lunch. Just then, a strange woman appeared in front of the kindergarten. She was wearing fashionable clothes and sunglasses, and looked very elegant. She smiled at the doorman aunt and explained that she was here to pick up a child. I was chatting cheekily with my buddies and didn't even notice her arrival, until she walked up to us, leaned down and said to me, "Little friend, your mom has something to do today and can't come to pick you up. Let me come and take you to her." "Okay." I froze and felt a twinge of uneasiness in my heart. Mom had never said she would let anyone else pick me up. But this woman's smile was so gentle, and what she said sounded so believable. I hesitated and asked, "Where's Mom?" She smiled and touched my head. "Mom's busy at the office. She called and asked me to pick you up." "Don't worry. Come with me." My friends looked at her too, a little curious. Just then, the kindergarten teacher came over and asked, "May I ask who you are? Do you have a certificate for picking up your child?" Without showing any expression of panic, the woman pulled out a piece of paper and said, "This is a power of attorney given to me by the child's mother. Please don't worry." The teacher took the paper, looked at it, and frowned. She turned to me and said, "Xiaoming, your mom never said she wanted someone else to pick you up. Wait a minute, I'll give your mom a call to confirm." The woman's expression changed slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. She smiled and said, "Of course, I can understand your caution. It's just that I have things to do and I wish I could take the child quickly." The teacher turned to go to her office to make a phone call while I stood still, my heart growing uneasy. The woman saw the teacher leave and suddenly said to me, "Come on, let's go find Mommy." She took my hand and tried to lead me away. I hesitated for a moment, but eventually stopped. "I'll wait until the teacher finishes her call." Her smile disappeared instantly and a hint of sulkiness flashed in her eyes. Just then, the janitorial aunt also walked over and asked, "What's going on?" The woman let go of my hand and said coldly, "Nothing. I was just trying to help." She turned and hurriedly left the kindergarten, disappearing at the end of the street. The teacher soon returned and told me that my mom was very anxious on the other end of the phone and hadn't entrusted anyone to pick me up at all. It turned out that the woman was a liar, trying to trick me out of my life. Although the matter was resolved, I still felt heartbroken. If I had trusted that woman, the consequences would have been unimaginable. When my mother arrived at the kindergarten, she hugged me tightly and burst into tears. She thanked the teacher and the janitorial aunts profusely and repeatedly urged me to be wary of strangers in the future. Since then, I have become more vigilant and no longer trust strangers. That terrible morning is over, but it left me with a deep lesson. Whenever I think back to that experience, I feel a chill. And I am more grateful to the teacher and the janitorial aunt who protected me that day. Time flies. I have grown up, but that memory is still as clear as yesterday. It always reminds me that there is always some danger lurking around us in the world, and we must always be vigilant to protect ourselves and those around us. It was a cold winter night, and the wind was howling outside, interspersed with icy snowflakes slapping against the windows. I was 10 years old, lying alone in my own cot, covered with a thick quilt, my heart filled with anticipation for the upcoming Christmas. My parents had gone to bed early, and the only sounds in the house were the ticking of the clock and the wind and snow outside the window. I lay in bed, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. It was so late at night that all the sounds in the house seemed extraordinarily clear. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about what kind of gift I would receive tomorrow, and gradually felt a twinge of sleepiness. Just as I was about to fall asleep, I suddenly heard a slight rattle from downstairs, as if someone was walking around. My heart tightened, and I pricked up my ears to listen carefully. The sound was so soft that it was almost inaudible, but it was exceptionally clear in this silent night. My heart began to pound and my mind raced with possibilities. Could it be Dad getting up to use the restroom? But the sound was coming from downstairs, and Mom and Dad's room was upstairs. I held my breath and tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was a cat or some other critter coming in. I tried to convince myself, but the footsteps sounded closer and closer, not like something a small animal could make. A horrible thought popped into my head. There was a burglar in the house. My whole body stiffened, afraid to move. Footsteps hovered downstairs for a moment, followed by the soft sound of a door opening, as if someone was looking for something room by room. I buried my head under the covers and tried to keep as quiet as possible, but my heart was beating faster and faster, almost jumping out of my chest. Time seemed to pass unusually slowly. Each second felt like a century. Footsteps gradually moved towards the stairs and my heart rose into my throat. The stairs in the house creaked at a few steps, and I could hear clearly that the thief was taking one step up. I knew that if he walked up, sooner or later he would enter my room. My mind raced, trying to think of a way to deal with it. I could yell and scream, but that might provoke the thief and be more dangerous instead. I could hide in the closet, but then the thief would easily find me once he came in to search. I decided to pretend to be asleep, hoping that the thief was just here to steal something and wouldn't hurt me. The footsteps came closer and closer, eventually stopping at the door of my room. I closed my eyes tightly and tried to keep my breathing steady, pretending to be asleep. The door to my room was gently pushed open, and a cold wind drilled in, causing me to shiver. I heard light footsteps come into the room, followed by a rustling sound like they were rummaging for something. My heart almost stopped beating, and all I could hear in my ears was my own breathing and the thief's movements. I opened the slits lightly and peeked through the gaps in my eyelashes. The room was dim, but I could see a dark shadow rummaging through the drawers at my desk. There was nothing of value on my desk, just some textbooks and stationery. The dark shadow didn't seem interested in these things as he walked back towards my bed and stood next to me. I felt him leaning down to look at me and was so nervous that I almost choked. At that moment, I was truly terrified that he would realize I was pretending to be asleep and do something terrible. He stood there for a few seconds, seeming to confirm that I was really sleeping, and then turned towards the closet. I heard the closet door being pulled open and the clothes inside being rummaged through. I silently prayed that he would leave quickly and not find the toy box I had secretly hidden under the covers. Time passed by, and the dark shadow rummaged around my room for a while, seemingly not finding what he wanted. Then he walked towards my bookshelf and flipped through the books. I was glad in my heart that there was nothing of value on the bookshelf except for my textbooks and some storybooks. After a while, the dark shadow seemed to lose his patience as he walked towards the window and gently pulled open the curtains as if checking the outside. My room was on the second floor, and escaping through the window was almost impossible. Still, I nervously stared at his every movement, fearing that he would suddenly notice something unusual about me. He eventually gave up and slowly walked out of my room. I heard the sound of footsteps fading away. Back downstairs. My heart relaxed a little, but I still didn't dare to take it lightly. I knew that he was still in the house, and I had to keep quiet and continue to pretend to be asleep until he left. After about 10 minutes, I heard more rummaging coming from downstairs. The thief seemed to be searching the living room for items of value. My mind raced, thinking about how I could get out of the situation. Suddenly, I remembered that my mom and dad had an old dial phone in their bedroom. Maybe I could sneak in and call the police when the thief wasn't looking. I carefully got up from the bed, trying not to make any noise. Gingerly, I walked to the door and watched the commotion downstairs through the crack. The lights downstairs were dim, but I could faintly see dark shadows rummaging through drawers in the living room. I took a deep breath and gently pushed open the door to my room, heading towards Mom and Dad's room. Mom and Dad's room was across the hall from mine, and I gently pushed open the door to their room and fumbled to find the phone. The moment I picked up the phone, my palms were covered in cold sweat. I tried to calm myself down and dialed the police. "Hello, this is the alarm center. How may I help you?" The operator's voice came on the other end of the line. I lowered my voice and whispered, "Hello, there's a burglar in my house. I'm on the second floor now. Can you send the police here quickly?" The operator's voice immediately became serious. "Please remain calm. The police are on their way. Please try not to make any noise and protect yourself." I hung up the phone, put down the receiver, and gently walked back to my room. Just the moment I closed the door to my room, I heard a rush of footsteps coming from downstairs, as if the thief had discovered something. I was shocked and immediately lay back on the bed, continuing to pretend to sleep. The footsteps quickly came from downstairs, getting closer and closer. My heartbeat accelerated again, almost jumping out of my chest. At that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of fear and helplessness. The footsteps stopped at the door to my room, and I heard the door being gently pushed open as the dark figure walked in again. He stood beside the bed and seemed to be watching my movements carefully. I closed my eyes tightly and tried to keep my breathing steady, pretending to be asleep. My heart was filled with fear, lest he would realize that I had just called the police. Time seemed to stand still as the dark figure stood by my bed for several seconds, and finally he seemed to be sure that I was really sleeping and turned to leave the room. I heard footsteps fading away and eventually disappearing downstairs. After a few minutes, I heard sirens from outside, followed by the police. It was at that moment that I finally breathed a sigh of relief. The police quickly rushed into the house and restrained the thief. My parents were also awakened and rushed over to check on me. When I saw the police take the thief away, I had mixed emotions.